Hey everybody! Tonight we're talking about something truly awful, but incredibly important, the war in Ukraine. This conflict has shaken the world and continues to impact millions of lives every single day. It's a story of resilience, tragedy, and the fight for sovereignty. It's like that messy breakup you can't stop hearing about, except instead of passive-aggressive Facebook posts, there are actual tanks. Imagine waking up to the sound of military vehicles rolling through your streets, your neighborhood turned into a war zone overnight, and explosions, lots of explosions. The kind that shake the ground and leave cities in ruins. The kind that make you wonder if you'll ever feel safe again. Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. This wasn't just a sudden decision, it was a calculated move that had been brewing for a long time. It wasn't exactly a surprise party. Tensions had been simmering for years. The world watched as the situation escalated, hoping it wouldn't come to this. But deep down, many knew it was inevitable. But this full-scale invasion, a real "oh shit, they weren't kidding" moment for the entire world. Governments scrambled to respond, sanctions were imposed, and global leaders condemned the aggression. This isn't just about borders on a map. It's about the very essence of national identity and sovereignty. It's about a country fighting to maintain its independence against a powerful adversary. It's about people. Families huddled in subway stations turned bomb shelters. Parents trying to comfort their children amidst the chaos, hoping for a moment of peace. Millions fleeing their homes, becoming refugees overnight. Imagine leaving everything behind, not knowing if you'll ever return or what you'll find if you do. It's about a nation fighting for its right to exist. Soldiers and civilians alike standing up to defend their homeland, their culture, and their future. This is a fight for freedom, folks. And it's happening right now. People around the world are rallying in support, showing that the spirit of resistance and the desire for peace are universal. To understand this mess, we need to rewind a bit. Let's take a journey back in time to the days when the world was a very different place. Picture the Soviet Union, a giant, crumbling empire. It was a vast and powerful entity, but it was also teetering on the edge of collapse. In 1991, it went poof. The Soviet Union dissolved almost overnight, leaving a power vacuum and a lot of uncertainty. It broke up into a bunch of independent countries. Each one of these new nations had to find its own way, navigate its own path. One of those was Ukraine. For the first time in centuries, Ukraine had the chance to chart its own course, to be its own master. Ukraine's got history, lots of it. This land has seen empires rise and fall, cultures blend and clash, but for centuries it was stuck under someone else's thumb. Dominated by foreign powers, Ukraine's identity was often suppressed. First the Russian Empire, then the Soviets. So independence? Huge deal. It was a monumental shift, a seismic change in the region, like winning the lottery, except your prize is self-determination instead of a giant pile of cash. The joy and hope were palpable. But here's the thing about breakups. They're messy, and this one, messier than a bowl of borscht after a night of vodka shots. The transition was chaotic, filled with political turmoil and economic hardship. The road to stability was anything but smooth. Russia wasn't exactly thrilled about letting go of Ukraine. They had their own interests and strategic concerns. They saw it as a buffer zone, a way to keep NATO and the West at arm's length. The geopolitical stakes were incredibly high. Ukraine had to navigate these treacherous waters, balancing its newfound independence with the pressures from its powerful neighbor. Despite the challenges, the spirit of the Ukrainian people remained unbroken. They were determined to forge their own destiny. Today, Ukraine continues to strive for a brighter future, building on its rich history and resilient spirit. The journey is far from over, but the path to independence has laid a strong foundation for the nation's future. Fast forward to 2014, a year that would mark a significant turning point in Eastern European geopolitics. Ukraine's government, cozying up to Russia, decides to ditch a deal with the European Union. This decision was seen as a betrayal by many Ukrainians who had hoped for a future aligned with Europe. Bad move. Protests erupt. People take to the streets, demanding closer ties with the West. The discontent was palpable, and the streets of Kiev became a battleground for the soul of the nation. This was the Euromaidan revolution. Think of it as Ukraine's "we want change" moment. The square, Maidan Nezalezhnosti, became the epicenter of this movement, symbolizing the people's desire for a democratic and European future. Russia, not a fan of change, or democracy for that matter, decides to stir the pot. Vladimir Putin and his government saw the revolution as a threat to their influence in the region. They seized Crimea, a Ukrainian peninsula with a majority Russian population. The move was swift and strategic, catching the world off guard. "It's ours now," they basically said. The annexation was a bold statement of power and defiance against international norms. International community, that's not how this works, but Russia didn't care. And that wasn't all. The annexation of Crimea was just the beginning of a larger strategy. They also started backing separatists in eastern Ukraine, in a region called Donbas. This support included military aid, training, and even direct involvement of Russian troops. This kicked off a conflict that's been simmering ever since. The war in Donbas has led to thousands of deaths, displacement of civilians, and a humanitarian crisis that continues to this day. The region remains a flashpoint, with no clear resolution in sight. Section 4, the Donbas Crucible, humanitarian crisis unfolds. Imagine living in a war zone for 8 years. That's the reality for people in Donbas. Constant shelling, fear, uncertainty. It's like living in a Michael Bay movie, except the explosions are real and there's no cut button. Over 14,000 people have died in Donbas since 2014. That's more than the entire population of some small towns. And the humanitarian crisis? Worse than a public restroom after a chilly cook-off. People are struggling to get basic necessities, food, water, shelter. It's a humanitarian disaster, folks. Section 5. Voices from the rubble, stories of displacement and resilience. Let's talk about the human cost of this war, because behind the headlines and the casualty figures are real people. People like Anya, a single mother from Donetsk, who fled her home with her 2 young children when the shelling started. They packed their lives into a few suitcases and left everything behind. Or take Sergei, a retired teacher who lost his home in a rocket attack. He now lives in a makeshift shelter, relying on aid organizations for survival. These are just 2 stories among millions, each one a reminder of the devastating impact of this conflict.